For nearly 200 years, huge armies from Europe marched thousands of miles from home with a single goal in mind: to conquer a sacred city in a distant land. This was the time of the Crusades, and we're about to dig into what drove one of the most incredible and intense moments in all of history. I mean, think about that for a second. For 2 whole centuries, the entire focus of Western Europe was a war over one city, Jerusalem. What could possibly motivate hundreds of thousands of people to travel so far at such an unbelievable risk? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to unpack right now. To really get the Crusades, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. It all started with a single, incredibly powerful speech that basically set the entire continent on fire. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the late 11th century. There's a new power on the block, the Seljuk Turks, and they're pushing west. They're getting dangerously close to the great Christian Byzantine Empire. So, in a pretty desperate move, the emperor in Constantinople sends a message to the Pope in Rome, basically saying, hey, we could really use some military help over here. And this is how the Pope responds. In 1095, at the Council of Clermont in France, Pope Urban II doesn't just agree to send some soldiers. No, he completely reframes the whole situation. He calls on all the knights and lords of Europe to go on an armed pilgrimage, a holy war, to rescue Jerusalem itself. This speech was the spark that lit the fuse. But it wasn't just a call to duty. The Pope offered a seriously powerful incentive: a special indulgence. Now, for a medieval Christian, this was an unbelievable deal. It meant that if you fought, and even died for this cause, you could basically skip purgatory and go straight to heaven. It was a spiritual guarantee that was almost impossible to turn down. The reaction to the Pope's call was bigger than anyone could have possibly imagined. And what happened next? Well, that was even more shocking. You had 2 totally different groups of people answer the call. The first was this huge, chaotic wave of peasants. They were fired up with religious passion, but, they were mostly unarmed. Tragically, very few of them even made it. But right behind them came the real power: the organized, heavily armored armies of Europe's knights. This timeline really shows you just how wild that first century was. The call goes out in 1095, and just 4 years later, completely against the odds, the First Crusade actually captures Jerusalem. They set up a Christian kingdom, but it's on shaky ground from the start. Less than 50 years later, they need a second crusade just to defend it. And by 1187, the city is lost all over again, this time to the legendary Muslim leader Saladin. And that sets the stage for the most famous crusade of them all. So the fall of Jerusalem sends shockwaves through Europe. A new call to arms goes out, and this time, the biggest names in Europe answer, leading to an epic showdown between 2 of history's most iconic leaders. In one corner, you've got Richard the Lionheart, the King of England, leading the Christian forces. And in the other, Saladin, the Sultan who had united the Muslim world and taken back the Holy City. Their rivalry was a total clash of titans, full of brutal warfare, but also a surprising amount of mutual respect. It truly became the stuff of legend. And here's an amazing little piece of trivia for you. After Richard finally made peace with Saladin, he got captured on his way back to England and was held for a massive ransom. All those stories you've heard about Robin Hood raising money to free the king while his evil brother John rules the land, that part is actually based on real history. Now, despite the heroics of guys like Richard the Lionheart, the Crusader kingdom in the Holy Land was really living on borrowed time. The next part of our story is one of a slow but pretty much inevitable decline. For another 100 years, the Crusader States managed to hang on, clinging to a few cities on the coast. But by 1290, it was all over. After a brutal siege, their last major stronghold, the port city of Acre, finally falls. And with its capture, the Christian kingdom in the Holy Land is gone. The 200-year experiment was officially over. But, and this is a big but, the idea of a crusade didn't die when Acre fell. It just changed. As the Crusader states were wiped off the map in the east, a new power was rising: the Ottoman Turks. They started pushing into southeastern Europe, and suddenly the focus of crusading shifted. It wasn't about attacking the Holy Land anymore. It was about a desperate defense of Europe itself. This new era of crusading reached its dramatic finale in 1453. And the irony here is just incredible. Constantinople, the very same city whose call for help kicked this whole thing off 350 years earlier, finally fell to the Ottoman army. The ancient Christian capital became Istanbul. and the balance of power in the world shifted forever. Which brings us right back to our original question. Now that we've seen how it all went down, let's try to get to the why. What was really going on inside the head of someone who would leave everything they knew behind to go fight in this war? So why did they do it? Well, the truth is, there's no single easy answer. It was a really complex mix of motivations. For a lot of people, it was about genuine piety. They truly believed it was their sacred duty. For others, it was the call of adventure, or the hope of getting rich and winning new lands. And sometimes, pure greed took over, like when the Fourth Crusade weirdly ended up sacking the Christian city of Constantinople instead. But no matter the reason, for every single person who went, it was a massive sacrifice. They had to risk absolutely everything. At the end of the day, the Crusaders show us a time when people believed that certain ideas about God, about duty, about Holy Land were worth the ultimate price. Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. What ideas, if any, do we believe are worth that same incredible level of sacrifice today?